Oh, so much to preach on, so little time. But anyway, that's, it was 27 years ago. It was the day after my ordination, 27 years ago, this week actually. And I preached on this very gospel passage at my first Mass of Thanksgiving at Holy Family Cathedral at the time. And now it's the old cathedral. And it was an amazing sight. I remember that. It was my first public Mass of Thanksgiving the day before, so the ordination happened on a Friday, and then the first Mass of Thanksgiving was just with my family. And there's about, as you know, I have 8 siblings and dozens of cousins, and so we took up, so that was just with them, about 75, 80 people at my first one. And then the next day, we went to the noon Mass at Holy Family, and which was a parish I was baptized in and everything. So nice little thank you. And so it was pretty amazing, because when you show up and your family takes up the first 5 pews of the cathedral, then of course things get crowded in the church, and it was really kind of fun. But the nice thing was the young men were giving up their seats to anybody who needed one, and so it was very gallant. And so it was kind of, I'm standing there at the beginning of the homily, and I'm looking around, and it's this packed cathedral, and then all these young men standing around the outside. I was like, oh, this is kind of a neat image. And it just struck me, and I just said, well, guys, if any of you are thinking of a vocation to the priesthood, I've got a seat. So, but anyway, it was kind of fun. I asked the pastor for half the collection. He said no. And now I know why he said no. But anyway, it's a great story. And at that time I preached about, I concentrated on that idea of who touched me. And I used it as kind of a thank you to all those who had kind of helped me on my journey to that day. It's funny, with a little more experience, there's a lot more perspective. And you're certain God has a wonderful way of broadening your vision beyond your own experience, doesn't he? And the story of Jairus' daughter and the woman who's healed when she touches the edge of Jesus' cloak, that has not changed. Yet it's funny how our perspective will change over time and with experience, doesn't it? You can read the same passage dozens of times, and if you're at a different place in life, it'll say something very different. That's the case now. If we look at it here, there are kind of 3 different encounters. It's one of these wonderful sandwich gospels passages where you've got the beginning, and then you've got the story in the middle, and then you've got the completion of the story of Jairus and the healing of his daughter at the end. So there's the encounter, there's the healing, and then there's at the home, and we can learn a little something from each one of those. Just a quickie little comment on each one of those episodes. So what's the setting for this passage? Jesus is on the shore. Where is he coming back from? Well, remember, he's had a busy day. He's just finished the Sermon on the Mount, and then they went across to the other side, the non-Jewish side of the lake, and that's where he ran into Gerasene demoniac and expelled the demon from this fellow, and of course put a pig farm out of business in the process. But then they returned. They asked him to leave, and here he comes back. So now he's on the shore, and the crowd is there, and the encounter with Jairus happens just as he gets back on his home turf. And I'm struck by this. Now understand who Jairus is. That Jairus, as he's known, happens, he must have been something to see a leader in the community falling at the feet of Jesus. I mean, this is one of the leaders of the community. And can you imagine the governor, the mayor, or anybody doing this? The archbishop. Well, at the feet of Jesus, yes. I could see that. And many of us have been on our knees in front of Christ for more than one reason, but it must have been something to see all the same. And it's important to remember, Jairus is not there for himself. He's there for his daughter. He doesn't want Jesus the rabbi, the teacher. He wants Jesus the prophet. He pleads for healing. And I like Jairus. I like him a lot. He shows us that we should never be afraid to approach Jesus with our needs or the needs of others. And we should not hesitate to ask the Lord of life for that which will give life. It's a way of affirming our reliance on God's love and God's mercy and saying that, no, we are not self-sufficient. Perhaps I've told you this story before. This woman, she's a very, very holy woman, very pious woman. Lovely woman. She's great, And we're talking about prayer and certain things, and I was saying, well, just out of curiosity, what do you ask for in prayer? He said, well, I never ask for anything in prayer. Well, why not? Well, I don't want to bother God. Facepalm. Bother God? How could you bother God? This is the God who loved you into existence. This is the God who redeemed you by his passion, death, and resurrection, reconciled you to himself on the cross and all creation. This is the God that has given everything for you. You can't bother God. He wants to give you this, the Lord of life wants to give you that which will give you life. He's done everything. Ask, seek, knock. It's our way of affirming our reliance. It's an act of humility to ask for what we need from God, and do it all the time. And I always say to folks, ask big, ask huge. You have a huge God. He's gone all the way to the cross for you. He's not going to stop now. Ask big. Ask for the eternal gifts, not the things you can get in this life to pass the test or this or that. Okay, fine, do. But make sure you ask for the eternal gifts. Wisdom, grace, strength. All the things that this world can't give or that you can't get on your own. Ask. It's a way of being very humble. And Jairus shows us how to be humble before God. Let's talk about the woman with the with the hemorrhage. And she's something else. Now, what's the story behind her? Well, she has to be discreet. I'm getting some feedback here, John. She has to be discreet. Why? Primarily because of the nature of her condition. It rendered her ritually unclean. You can read all about it in the various books of Deuteronomy, the book of Leviticus. She could not go into the temple or the synagogue, let alone approach Jesus openly for fear of giving scandal. And so it must have been ironic for her to seem so isolated in the midst of the crowd. She has to be discreet. And the striking thing here that strikes me in the encounter here, and there's all the other things we get to contemplate, but one thing to concentrate on here, at least for me, is that Jesus is not unaffected by the encounter, is he? He's like, oh, healing, great, let's go. No. Jesus is not unaffected by the encounter. And any of us in the church who do anything, any ministry, now we have 47 recognized ministries in the church with a coordinator and all those other fun things. And any of us who do any kind of ministry in the church, it could be Eucharistic minister, could be visiting the homebound, could be as a catechist, could be as a small group leader or participant, whatever. Any of us who've done any kind of ministry in the church, you cannot emerge from the encounter unaffected. And sometimes we'll leave somebody's home or or mass or a class or whatever and I kind of wonder sometimes, well, who ministered to who here? And leave better for the experience. Jesus is not unaffected by the encounter, and any of us who seek to imitate Jesus are not unaffected by the encounter. Finally, let's go to the home of Jairus. Jairus is an interesting guy. We're at the home, and we can learn basically from here. We can learn that when our resources are exhausted, God is just getting started. Isn't that something? I'm struck in this particular instance that they ridicule Jesus just before he performs the miracle. Remember what he says to Jairus at the very beginning when he hears about the death of his daughter, in quotes, air quotes, European air quotes. Do not be afraid, just have faith. Seems rather Pollyannish, doesn't it? Unless you understand in whom that faith is being placed. That is Christ himself. And so as people of faith, people who would follow Jesus, I think we need to take heed. I think how easy it is to let our fear overcome our faith and forget that miracles really do happen even in the present day. I have seen 3 in my day, personally. And, we have to understand that the church, whenever we are, especially when we're evaluating somebody, and when somebody's cause is up for sainthood, We take miracles very, very seriously, probably more seriously than anybody else. We will investigate them just to make sure so we can say without question, indeed this is. One of the fun encounters I had in seminary was there was this group of Carmelite sisters. Well, Carmelite sisters are usually cloistered. This particular group was semi-cloistered. They ran a hospital. And I found out later, because I'm sitting down there with and they were all very young. It was very interesting. The Mother Superior was 39. The rest were all much younger than she. And they were all nurses and whatnot and administrators because they ran a hospital in California. I said, well, what brings you to Rome? She says, well, we're here for the canonization of Blessed Lawrence, somebody, I forget the fellow's name. And I said, well, the second miracle happened in our hospital. Really? Tell me about it. Well, it was a fellow that had some sort of fibrosis in his lungs. The doctors had done everything they can, and so then this is how they document a miracle. You have all of the medical records before the doctor said, that's all we can do, and they said, well, we have the relic of Blessed so-and-so. They placed it on his chest, a spontaneous and complete reversal and healing. They scoped his lungs, said he had the lungs of a 20-year-old. And so then they do a whole battery of tests again to make sure and document everything else. And so it's pretty amazing. So you have before the intervention of the saint and after. Miracles do happen in the present day. I'm here to tell you, they're real. And the church takes them very seriously. So we should never, never, never be afraid to ask for the miracle. Remembering, of course, that God has three ways of answering prayer. Yes, not yet, and I have something better in mind for you. Yes, not yet, I have something better in mind for you. But we should never be afraid to ask for the miracle, because when we do, then God can go to work, and we understand that our resources are not enough, and we rely on God. It's a great act of faith. Don't ever be afraid to ask for the miracle. And so there's much we can learn from each part of the story in today's gospel reading. And whether it is the encounter with Jairus, with Jesus on the shore, whether it's the woman with the hemorrhage, whether it's in the home and the raising of the child where the miracle happens, I guess my prayer would be that we would have the faith to approach the Lord in our need, confident that he still wants to work the miracle of grace in our lives.